The year was 2020. At the confluence of the Ohio and Tennessee rivers in Paducah, Kentucky, it was Quilt Week, and the pandemic had just begun. Then it was 2021, and the pandemic was still raging on. It's 2022 now, and in Paducah, Kentucky, it's Quilt Week. Welcome to a very special episode of So-and-So, brought to you by Bernina, made to create. I'm Meg Goodman, and we are at Quilt Week 2022 in Paducah, Kentucky. We're here to bring you the sounds that just haven't been heard here for 3 years. We're going inside this event to bring you interviews with some of the exhibitors, behind-the-scenes adventures, exhibit floor conversations, food reviews, and a lot more. Join us now as we enjoy the music of the Paducah Tillman High School Marching Band, who is officially opening Quilt Week 2022. Quilt Week, put on by the American Quilter Society, or AQS, has become an institution in Paducah, Kentucky, which is also the home of the National Quilt Museum. This event brings thousands of quilters from across the U.S. and the world to this place for contests, exhibits, workshops, lectures, and vendors. In fact, so many people come to this event, the population of Paducah triples. Hotels and restaurants are maxed out, and the town all comes together to celebrate the passion and creativity of quilters worldwide. Bonnie Browning, executive show director at AQS, has a deep passion for her quilting, AQS, and Quilt Week.
Well, I am the buck stops here. I answer all the hard questions. But mainly, I'm just in charge of making sure that we get everything done in advance for the shows. When we open the doors at 9 o'clock on Wednesday morning, if it isn't done, it won't get done. So I work really hard to make sure all of our staff knows what they need to do. We have an employee meeting where we go over absolutely everything from parking changes to locations of different events that people are used to. All of our staff don't necessarily work on the show, but we use them all during the show. So it's important that everybody know what we planned for this show.
Are there interesting facts about Quilt Week that you can share with our listeners that they might not know about?
We had 48 states plus Washington, D.C., and 7 countries registered to take workshops and special events here at the show. And so the first question I ask, because everyone asks me that, is what 2 states are missing?
What 2 states are missing? Do you know?
Yes, I do. Maine and North Dakota.
Okay, we need to work on that then,
We
right?
do.
Okay.
We need to get them here.
So the show did not happen because of the pandemic for 2021 and 20. What's it like being back? How is this different after that many years?
First of all, just like everybody else, we had to furlough and eventually lay off a number of our staff. And so we have a minimal staff. We have 15 staff who help with the quilt show year round. And
you do all of this with 15 people.
Yes.
That's pretty amazing.
And people don't realize that there are a million details that have to happen to make this work. And people have different responsibilities. Well, previously, we maybe had 2 people that were in charge of registration. Now we have 1. Some of the jobs that somebody else did, I'm now doing. I'm working with the appraisers and people getting appointments to have their quilts appraised. And so we all have 2 or 3 hats that we're wearing now. And it just means everybody's working just a little bit harder.
A lot bit harder.
Yes.
Bonnie, what's new at the show this year?
The quilts are amazing. Every year we say the quilts can't get any better. Every year the quilts do get better. Now, one thing that's a little different this year is normally the quilts can't be more than 3 years old. This year, because we didn't do a show for 2 years, we made that time frame. It could be 5 years old. That's just for 2022 only. Next year, we're going to go back to 3 years of age. I think that meant that we got the cream of the crop from 2 additional years. The quilts in this show are truly amazing.
And so Quilt Week is once again live and in person. There are myriad things to see and do here. One of the attendees' favorites is the exhibit of the work of notable quilters. We're here with Janet Stone, who won the Best of Show award for her quilt at Quilt Week 2022. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's quite a thrill.
Tell us about the quilt.
It's called Crazy for You. There are 4 U's on it, sheep. I collect sheep, so I like to put them in quilts. It was based on kind of a crazy quilt. I mean, that was the inspiration for it. It turned out to be 2-sided, which I did not plan in the beginning. I made the blocks separately, and I was going to put them on their background and quilt it all together, but the blocks have a lot of layers in them, so I was afraid to go through all the layers, so I just decided to quilt the blocks separately and then attach them to the background, which I could quilt before I attached them, which I quilted from the back of the quilt so that you kind of get a different perspective of something different on the back of the quilt.
How long did it take you to complete this?
It took about 9 months. I only work on one thing at a time. I do have a day job, so I only quilt at night and on weekends, but I'm very focused once I get started, but about 9 months on this one.
How did you learn to quilt?
Well, I learned to sew when I was like 10 years old. My mom taught me how to sew. She used to sew all our clothes and made us take sewing class when we were kids. I hated it for the longest time. I used to cross stitch and needlepoint. I didn't get back to quilting until probably the late 90s, mid to late 90s. We moved into a house. I used to do a lot of cross stitch and had pretty much filled up all my walls with cross stitch samplers was what I did. And we moved into a new house, and it had a railing on it that cried out for a quilt, so I just thought I'm going to start quilting, and that's how it started. I bought a really good sewing machine in 2006 and made the first quilt with the alphabet on it in 2008. I entered it in a show, and it won 3 prizes, and I was hooked. And that was when I've always had a thing for the alphabet, so I just decided then I was going to make a series of 26 quilts, all featuring the alphabet, and this one is number 20.
Quilt Show hasn't been live for 3 years.
I know.
What does it mean to you to be here in person again?
I mean, it's thrilling. I actually won Best of Show here in 2019, and then the pandemic hit. This quilt was supposed to go in the 2020 show, and of course that didn't happen, but I'm just thrilled to be back here. This is like one of my favorite shows. It's thrilling.
So one final question. Obviously, you are extremely good at what you do. You've won many prizes. What words of advice do you have for people just starting out quilting?
Totally practice, practice, practice. I mean, I didn't start out machine quilting. This is machine quilted on a sewing machine, and I didn't start out doing that. I started out hand quilting. Decided I didn't like that because I was poking myself with needles all the time. So I just sort of learned. I took one class on machine quilting. Read some books, saw things on YouTube and the internet, and just started practicing. And that was really the advice that I got from the teacher that I took from. So that's, people say they work on quilts and then they put them away for years and years. And I mean, you're not going to get anything finished if you do that. You just got to get it out and work on it. And like I say, I'm very focused and I only work on one thing at a time. But it's just a lot of practice.
Julia Quilthoff, whose passion for creating with fabric has spanned over 10 years. It was buying her first long arm in 2016 that transformed her life into a magical journey. She loves working with the different textures, colors, and having the freedom to design and discover different styles and techniques in long arm quilting. Julia considers herself as an always learning, curious, inquiring quilter who's always hungry for new ideas, designs, and visions. She specializes in boutique quilts and memory keeper quilts. Nobody's been here for 3 years. It's amazing that everybody is back in person. Tell us about what you are exhibiting this year.
Well, this year I'm both running the booth and I'm teaching 5 amazing long arm classes. And when you're saying 3 weeks without Paducah, 3 years without
3
Paducah,
years.
you're right.
Mm-hmm.
That hurts because I got my first contract with Paducah in 2020.
Oh, no.
And I was so waiting for it to happen because it felt so big for me. And like all the stitching experience still feels really big and unbelievable. But back in 2020, It was heartbreaking when all the shows were canceled, and Paducah was one of the spring shows. So it was one of the first shows that had to announce the cancellation. So it was very personal and very painful. So I'm really glad we're back, and it's really wonderful to see people, not on the screen of your Zoom,
Sure.
your computer and the pictures, but see people in their faces and even hug with some brave ones.
I mean, isn't it just the biggest party? And just the celebration, not only of what work has occurred, which is just phenomenal. The quilts that are in the show they're just blow you right out of the water. But it's just we forget what it does for us to be with our friends and our tribe, our people.
Karen Stone has been quilting since 1986. Her inspiration consists equally of innovation and tradition. Her quilts have won numerous awards, including first prizes in international competition, and her designs appear frequently in exhibition. Her clam session quilt received the Master of Innovation Artistry Award at the International Quilt Association in 2009, and her Indian orange peel quilt was People's Choice at Quilt National 95. Having enjoyed success in design, publication, and teaching, she finds great satisfaction in hand finishing a newly quilted piece.
I'm exhibiting a quilt that was accepted to the show in 2020. So I pulled it out of its box that it shipped to Paducah in before the pandemic, and that it stayed in that box for 2 years when that show was canceled. So it's really happy. It makes me feel really happy that this is the away quilt, my quilt that's a memory from a trip to Japan with my friends. So it's full of Japanese fabric that are old and new. But so that's my big quilt that's here, and then the small quilt is a OG Lotus quilt that's more of a modern quilt.
And we saw a first place ribbon hanging.
And then a judge's award.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm thrilled and so surprised.
And you're teaching here.
I am.
So what classes are you teaching?
I have for a long time taught paper foundation piecing, and while I don't do very much of that anymore, it's still fun to teach. And I teach a lot of machine applique.
So you learned to sew, then you took up quilting. Why did you decide to quilt?
I was one of those people that made a quilt. My excuse was that I had a baby to start, but I had seen quilts. I did grad school in Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana, and saw quilts there. Saw antique quilts and Amish quilts, and I saw contemporary quilts, art quilts. So it was really something that was kind of in my brain, in my heart, before I had that reason to start.
Starting a family seems to be a common thread for learning to quilt.
This is pretty hilarious. I'm a quilter. I've been making and creating quilts for over 15 years already, and I own just 2 quilts that I made for my babies when they were born. And these are all the quilts I have in my house. Can you believe it? Because all the quilts, they just come to me. I finish them and I let them go. And when I meet them again somewhere hanging at the show, that's like seeing the old friend and like, oh my gosh, is that you again? So the best experience was when I visited as just a tourist, a visitor, and I saw the quilts. That was wonderful because AQS really connects piecers and quilters and people who sew and people who quilt and bring us together. That is amazing.
Part of quilting is just that there are no 2 quilts alike. I've heard Bonnie Browning say that, and I love that. But that there is enormous diversity in the kind of work that we do, and its sources, and so there are a lot of different kinds of people. There are the people that you're very much like, and there are people that you're very much unlike. So yeah, it's a rich history and a rich culture, and I'm really thrilled to be part of it.
And you're getting to see everybody again.
Yeah.
The excitement that I've seen on the show floor when old friends see each other is just infectious.
Yes.
You can't help but be happy.
And as a teacher, this is when your friends are also teachers, right? Because you've seen each other at the shows and events through the years. You never really know when you're going to get to see which friends. So all of that is a lot of fun.
I enter the room at the show where I'm going to teach and share the experience, and I see it full with people who trusted me to come in to my classes and to listen to me. That makes my heart full and happy, because it's all about not the awards, not about how many sales we make, not about how many quilts we finish a year. It's all about how close we are and how many people we make happy and help feel happy. So my dream is to keep being enthusiastic about it. I heard a lot that when your hobby turns into job, it steals a lot of joy. So my dream is to keep my heart full of joy, to help people feel that joy too and share that joy with quilters.
Susan Carlson, who is currently teaching quilting nationally and internationally, knows how to share that as well. She's developed her own technique of fabric collage quilting, which she has explained in depth in 2 books, Freestyle Quilts and Serendipity Quilts. Susan has been creating art with fabric since 1983. This podcast is a lot about the connection to the quilting community, and standing here looking at the people loving your work, there's definitely a community. Tell us about your connection to that and what it means to you.
Well, I approached quilting from an art direction, and because I was in art school when I started using fabric. And so I kind of made my way into the quilting community because I was working with fabric and quilting it. And I find that there's just like, I'm sure a lot of different groups of people will say this, but, being part of this community, I feel like there's no one better than quilters. They are the nicest people. They love color, they love fabric, they know what it is to be a tactile person, they like giving hugs, they're just wonderful people. And I'm really happy to be a part of this sort of community.
This year you have 12 quilts in your specimens collection, including Kaloli Moondance, Stevie the saltwater crocodile, who travels in her own 7-foot tube, as she has a very prominent location in the show, right here over our shoulder. Tell us about these and the other works that you're exhibiting this year.
Okay, well, this is an exhibit, like you said, entitled Specimens, and each one of these animals has some sort of story to them, either a background story or a story about, or maybe it has gone extinct, or it has not actually been rediscovered to find out that it's not extinct, or just an interesting animal that Kaloli Moondance, which you mentioned, is declared one of the Earth's ugliest animals. It's the world's only carrion-eating stork.
Okay.
And she's a scavenger, and that all kind of sounded interesting to me, especially that it's an ugly animal, because I like to take something that's, it's interesting if it's ugly. And actually, she ended up looking kind of happy as she's dancing across the landscape. And she's made out of only scraps. So in a way, I have scavenged my scrap fabric from a lot of the other quilts that I've made and to create her. So she has a lot of the other animals inside of her.
The most prominent of Susan's displays is Stevie, the saltwater crocodile, who's named after Steve Irwin. This piece is 20 feet long.
Reactions that I've seen here so far, people saying, oh, they're all tingly when they see the crocodile, which is wonderful, because she's 20 feet, because that's the average size of a saltwater crocodile. And so I read that in a nature encyclopedia to my kid when he was about 3 or 4 years old, because that's what he liked to read. And so I'm taking my kid and with a tape measure and I'm thinking, I didn't realize how big 20 feet is, and imagining it as an animal, like in our house, the thing would go from door to door, and so I figured the only way that you can actually experience what that is to make it.
The judges really have their hands full this year. Take it from Ricky Timms.
OMG. The quality of quilts escalate, and judging this show was unbelievably difficult this time. I have never experienced anything like it.
There's so much to do here that every minute of every day is packed. Let's walk the exhibit floor to experience the excitement that's going on and hear from some of the attendees. Tina, where are you from?
I'm from Wakefield, Rhode Island.
Rhode Island.
Yes.
So you traveled quite a way for this quilt week.
Yes, I came with my best friend Sharon, and we flew in yesterday, and we're really happy to be here. I have not been to a quilt week at all, ever, so we're just thrilled to have come to the mecca of quilting.
What do you think of the show so far?
We're having a great time. We've spent a lot of money already, and the quilts are extraordinary, so we're really happy.
Donna, is this quilt show special to you this year because they haven't had it in 3 years?
That's for sure. We generally go to the show in Lancaster. A few years ago, we decided we needed to see a different quilt show. So we made plans in the fall to come to the show, hoping and praying that it wouldn't be canceled. So we're really excited to be here.
The Scissor Man is somebody that we were told by AQS we absolutely had to talk to. Brent, tell us about your business and why you are the Scissor Man.
Well, I've been doing this for 26 years and manufacture scissors exclusively for the sewing, quilting, and embroidery industry. And everything we manufacture, including our rotary blades, we sharpen for as long as the customer owns them.
What does it mean to you to be at Quilt Week this week after not being able to be here in person for 3 years?
Well, after 25 years, I don't call this a expo or a convention. This is a reunion. And to be a part of this is a huge honor. I'm not only representing my company, I'm representing the American Quilter Society, and AQS is an incredibly first-class operation organization that unites people from all over the world, and to be a part of it is a pretty big, it was very emotional yesterday for the opening of it.
Scissor Man is one of a wide array of vendors that proves just how far the quilting world reaches. Rashonda with African Everything underscores this point.
So African Everything is really near and dear to me. My mother-in-law actually started Mandaleo about 30 years ago, and they're actually here in the pavilion. And so she has, she's aging, and she wants to continue to support the women. And so with African Everything, not only am I continuing what she started, but we are also adding in additional tribes that are outside of Africa. So we also have Nepal. And just being able to just bring the world of beauty and art to the Quilt Fest is like phenomenal to me, because I feel like there's so much fabric and art and ideas that we have just here in America, but to expand that, it's really something phenomenal. Yeah.
How's your experience at Quilt Week?
I love Quilt Week. My experience is always beautiful. It's always welcoming. Everyone is so excited to see the new things that the ladies have created, what new colors are in stock, what new patterns do we have, what animals prints did we bring, or hand dye items of that nature. And so because of that warm welcome, we're always excited to come. Like, even getting ready for Quilt Week is exciting.
And then there's Marty Michelle. You are a member of the Hall of Fame.
I am of the Quilters Hall of Fame. I'm honored to be there, and annually they induct a new member. I was the COVID inductee, so I had to wait an extra year for my induction, but it was great, and I feel very honored.
Tell us about your business.
My husband and I have been in the quilting industry since before there was a quilting industry. Our first company was in 1972. But our current business, which we started in 95, is acrylic tools for rotary cutting.
What does it mean to be back in person after 3 years at Quilt Week?
It tells me how out of practice I am, but I'm not out of practice talking to people and enjoying that immensely. So it's just fabulous, and it's great to see people's enthusiasm, and it'll be kind of like a memory of how exciting it was when we finally got back together.
Oh, it is so exciting, Meg. All the people who come to this show are kindred spirits. and the artistic creativity at these shows are just unbelievable. Even though during our quiet time you could look at quilts online, just seeing them in person, the 3D, is just really makes you, reinforces why we do what we do and what a wonderful industry it is to be in.
As both a vendor and show attendee, Catherine Gross, a Bernina regional manager, has a unique perspective.
Well, first of all, look at all the quilts. It's unbelievable. The quilts are, I think of all the shows around the country, and of which there are many. Paducah has its own place, and the quilts that we get are international, so it's really great to see the take that we have in the U.S. versus someone in Europe versus someone in Japan or Australia. And it's wonderful to be able to interact with those artists, too, when they're standing by their quilts. And it really makes you realize that it is an art form that's enjoyed worldwide.
Paducah really is a special place for quilters, and as excited as the attendees and vendors are to be here, the city of Paducah is even more excited to welcome them back. Bonnie, you've got a wonderful relationship with the city of Paducah. Everybody here comes around this event and participates. Tell us a little bit about that. You can feel that when you're anywhere in town.
We max out every creature comfort in this city, from hotels, bathrooms, food. If you haven't had to stand in line to get to eat someplace, I would be surprised if you haven't had to stand in line. And so it does take all of us. And that's why we have food tents out in the parking lot, so that we can't take space on the inside because that takes space away from hanging quilts and having vendors. So we put it in the parking lot and put tents up. It also means that we have to transport people. So the Visitors Bureau works with our hotels and attractions, and those businesses pay for the service to have people transported from here to their properties and back again. For the buses that AQS is using, we actually have some buses from some of the churches locally. So it really is everything. I always tell this story because we do shows in other cities. And Paducah is probably the only city that you would ever come into, and there would be quilters walking down the street, and one of our red coats happens to drive by, and they'd pull over and say, "Where are you headed?" And they'd say, "Oh, we're going to go downtown to, some shop or something," that you would get in the car and go with them. You would not do that in another city.
One of the biggest challenges the town of Paducah faces during this week is feeding and housing all of the attendees. To mitigate some of this, AQS erects a food tent and provides fare from many, many vendors. A perennial favorite is the strawberry shortcake that is made and served by Boy Scout Troop 200. Mark Ashburn from Boy Scout Troop 200. Tell us what you do with the troop.
What I do, I'm the scoutmaster. I've been with this troop for over 52 years, so I've been here a long time. Since the year after the quilt show started, we started selling strawberry shortcakes.
How did you decide to make it the strawberry shortcake?
Well, we have the lot that we were in was leased by Paducah Hospitality Association, and Turner Dairy was a member of the Hospitality Association, and so they told us they said we could have the spot, but we had to sell ice cream. And so we thought, well, what can we do with ice cream? I said, strawberries are almost in season, strawberry shortcakes, and I said, but you can't sell strawberry shortcakes with ice cream. Somebody said, sure you can. So that's what we did. We started selling strawberry shortcakes with ice cream.
So we were told when we arrived here that we had to taste the strawberry shortcake, which is pretty amazing, and that you all do this as your only fundraiser all year.
Fundraiser for the year, and it supports almost all of our trips. It does a good job for us. I had a lady come up and say, "Did you know your strawberry shortcake is world-renowned?" And I said, "No. What happened?" She said, "I was on an international flight from Brisbane to L.A., and I was sitting there, and two ladies across the aisle started talking to each other, and they said, 'Where are you going?' And they said, 'Well, we're going to Paducah.' and we're going to the quilt show. And then the lady said, oh, well, if you go to the quilt show, you've got to get the Boy Scout strawberry shortcake. It's the bomb. And some lady further up said, she's right, it's the absolute bomb. So we were on an international flight. Four people knew about us in our strawberry shortcake.
Tell us about Troop 200.
Troop 200 was formed in 1954. We've had well over 100 Eagles. We fairly active. We have about 35 kids and boys and girls in the troop. We have a girl troop and a boy troop.
Mark, Paducah's Quilt City, and it's a very special place full of a lot of friendly people this week. What should our listeners know about Paducah?
Oh, for one thing, they need to go see the mural on the flood wall. We've got a lot of color in downtown, a lot of really good restaurants, and they ought to try to drive variety.
Quilt Week just wouldn't exist without Meredith and Bill Schrader and their daughter Lynn Lloyd, who began this event in 1984. Meredith and Lynn joined us to share their story. It's amazing what you built from your love of quilting, and I can't think of anybody better to tell the story of this than the two of you.
I guess we have to go back. We were publishers years ago, and we published books. And so this all started when a book salesman came in one time and said that he had just bought the biggest order for paper for a book, which was a quilt book. It was Carla Hassel's first book. And so we said, well, if there's book sales that great, we need to look into this. So we went to the first quilt show in Paducah at a guild show and tried to find out what's going on, and we took our whole family. And so there at that quilt show, we said there's a lot of interest, and so we need to investigate a little bit more. So that's sort of how it started.
There was such a crowd at that quilt show, and they were getting a blue ribbon. I don't know if you said that. That's all they were getting. And so I remember Dad and Mom said, they need more than blue ribbon. They need money for this. This is art.
Sure.
And so that's how that started. We said we'd come back and put on a show, and we were going to award them. And so Best of Show gets $20,000, and then the other top awards get $10,000, and it goes down from there. So that was the main goal, was to show the art. And then build the museum at the same time to show the art even more to the quilters. So it was really to honor the quilters.
With all of the accomplishments of the show and the Quilt Museum and AQS, what's your proudest thing? And I'm sure you have to think about it, but is there something that's really special to you?
Oh, I really have to think about it. I mean, it's all great. I'm certainly proud of the museum, and I'm proud what it's done for our city. I'm proud of this show, what it's done. It brings in a lot of revenue for our city, and plus it's put Paducah on the map. So many places you go to travel say, oh, I know Paducah, that's a quilt show.
That's Quilt City. That's Quilt City, USA. They always, I don't care if we're in the country or out of country, they say, I know Paducah for Quilt City, USA. So that's probably one of the biggest in the museum. I agree, the museum. Quilts, they're amazing. This is art. I mean, people just think they're going to find some little blanket-looking thing.
Are there any special facts or little behind-the-scenes thing about putting on Quilt Week that you can share with us? I mean, it's a year-long adventure, but any good stories about what it takes to put this on?
It's a lot of work, really. It's a lot of work. But we all have, of course, it's a family, so we enjoy being together. You just think, I mean, think about it. I've worked with my husband, my daughter, 2 sons, I think a son-in-law. I was trying to think if I had a daughter-in-law, but mostly. So we've all worked together for all these years.
So for 30, since 1984, so 38 years.
Yeah, so that's the fun part, really. I mean, that's really the fun part.
38 years later, their grandson, Bill III, is now at the helm, and things are bigger and better than ever. What was it like being a kid growing up around this? I mean, I'm sure you had a job.
Yeah, for sure. So I kind of joke with people when they're like, "Hey, what was your first experience with the quilt show?" And for me, we used to sell buttons in our AQS booth back in the day. So when I was like 3-4 years old, I would be in the booth in Paducah trying, thinking I was selling buttons, and I'm sure they were probably just trying to keep me out of the way. But I can remember coming to all the Paducah shows, helping Dad hang signs and do all that stuff as early as 4 or 5 years old. So I've been in it a long time.
You recently purchased all of this. What inspired you to do that? Tell us the story about that.
Yeah. The family, my dad worked in it, my aunt worked in it, my grandmother was still in it every single day. My other uncle, he worked in the warehouse and shipping and everything. So they were all co-owners at the time. And basically they had decided that they were going to sell the company. And it was getting pretty down to the wire where it was fixing to go final, and some stuff happened. And basically, I just came to the family with my brother-in-law, James, who is actually we're partners in AQS together. He doesn't really get in the limelight, but we are 50-50 partners in it. But I came to him and I was like, hey, man, they're talking about selling it. Do you want to go into it with me? And he was like, yeah, let's do it. So we basically said, hey, if we match what this other company is wanting to do, will you sell it to me? And they kind of talked, and it all just kind of fell into place where they were like, yeah, because there was a lot of talk. I don't know what the other company would have done, but there was discussions that Paducah Quilt Show would no longer be going. I don't know what, like I said, I don't know all the details because I wasn't in the day-to-day, but from conversations that I had with Meredith and Billy, it was, hey, they're not going to have Paducah Quilt Show anymore. Mm. And that's when I really sat down and thought really hard, hey, what would Granddad want? And so this is what he would have wanted.
So, Bill, what excites you about the future and your hopes for the quilting community?
So the thing that's exciting is I'm continuing a legacy that they built, and that is such a huge pillar in the quilting community. I mean, anytime you talk to a quilter, it's, hey, have you been to Paducah? No, but I'd love to go. Or, oh my gosh, I love Paducah. I want to get back. So owning this company, it just means, hey, Paducah is going to be there on that date in April, and the quilters are coming. And, I'm not going to sit here and lie and say I knew they were coming back. I mean, it was a lot of days of, even, we started getting pre-registers in, and we sold out 28 classes the first 6 hours that classes were open.
Wow. That's a record,
so,
right? Mm-hmm.
I think it was. And, even then I was still like, yeah, but there's a whole lot of seats, and what if only half of them show up? And to be honest, until we opened the doors at 9:00 on Wednesday, I still didn't know. But when we opened those doors, I was like, it's back.
Uh-huh.
It was really cool to be a part of it, and, see that Paducah's still here, and the quilters want to be here, and it still had the same buzz. I mean, all the hard work that I put in and again, I don't want to take anything away from my team, because I do have a whole lot of employees that really helped me out that I could not do this without. But for me, I spent lots of days in that office trying to get all that, and in the community too, talking to the mayor and the judge and all that stuff. So to see it all come to life and it be as successful as it has been this week, it's really something that means a lot to me.
Well, there you have it, a story about a community that transcends world boundaries to come together to celebrate their passion for all things quilting. A community that is so very diverse and yet so very much the same. All together here in 2022 at the confluence of the mighty Ohio and Tennessee rivers. Thank you for joining us for this very special episode of So and So. If you'd like to learn more about AQS and next year's Quilt Week, go to their website at AmericanQuilter.com. We'd like to thank all those who joined us for this podcast, and especially those who made this week's festivities come alive. And finally, I do want to thank Bernina for making this program possible. If you know someone you think has an outstanding story, a story that should be shared on this podcast, please drop me a note to info@soandsopodcast.com or just complete the form on our website. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite platform and visit our website, soandsopodcast.com, for more information about today and all of our guests. That's SEWANDSO podcast.com. I'm Meg Goodman, and I look forward to you joining us next time on So and So.